In progress.
Hi, this is Eli Ocheltree of the SnoKing Beekeepers Association, and tonight we are on July 16th, 2025. Tonight we're going to try to cover three topics in this order. We're going to do bears, the Evergreen State Fair, and then I will talk on Varroa, and I'm going to make it short as I possibly can, just picking between the top six the treatments for Varroa that we can actually recommend. Some of them are just no longer really good methods, especially if you're not commercial. So I will let Brandy start. Brandy is a journeyman candidate. You've been doing bears for quite a while, long enough to have had bear visitors to her apiary several times. And Brandy has the special knowledge that people have been asking and asking for. How many joules and amps and volts and wires, and how do I keep the bear out? Especially if the bear has gotten in once and wants to come back for more snacks, more bee larvae and snacks. Is that a good introduction, Brandy? Can you handle it
That's,
from there?
yep, that's a great introduction. I will go ahead and take it from there.
Okay, thank you, Brandy Eckman.
Yep. And no problem. And I do have two screens. So if you have a question while I'm presenting, I can see the chat. So feel free and drop it in the chat. So today we're going to talk about the bees and the bears and bear proofing your apiary in Western Washington. We've got our two subjects here. We've got our honeybee on my glove there. And this is Barry Potter, who we had visit our house about 6 years ago. First thing is know thy enemy. Black bears, also known as Ursus americanus, are by far the most common bear in Washington state. So if you're going to see bear, it's probably going to be a black bear. They number around 22,000. They range in weight from over 100 pounds to over 300 pounds, with the males being generally larger than the females. Black bears are generally human averse and are easily scared off with loud noises, motion, etc. They do not hibernate in Western Washington. They instead go into a state named known as torpor, which is essentially a deep sleep or a state of dormancy, which they occasionally wake from. So they actually don't sleep all winter like a lot of people think that they do. Being omnivorous, they eat nuts, berries, as well as scavenging insects, mammals, fish, and birds. But that doesn't mean they'll pass up a ripe garbage can, yard waste bin, bird feeder, or even hummingbird feeder. And when they seek out hives, they smell the honey, but they are actually seeking the protein-laden brood. On the right here, we've got this map of showing the range of black bears. All of this green area is habitat for them. The yellow area is fringe habitat, and then obviously the blue's water there. Male black bears are fairly territorial. It can have a territory that ranges from 10 to 59 square miles or 26 to 152 square kilometers, if that's what you prefer. Females also do not share territory with other females, but their own territory may and likely does overlap several male bears' territories. Females also tend to have much smaller territories ranging from 2.5 to 10 square miles. And what this means is that if you live in an area with bears, there's most likely only one in your area, but up to 4 if there's a mother that has cubs that survive. The average female black bear will not breed until she's about 3 to 5 years of age. She'll breed every other year and will have an average of 2 cubs. I'm sorry, could everybody mute themselves? I'm having some background noise that's that's a little loud. Club mortality is very high, with about 50% of cubs dying of natural causes within their first year. Sorry about that. Some common Q&A. The first one I get a lot is, how do I know if there's bears in my area? And if you haven't sighted them yourself, ask your neighbors, especially any that care for poultry or bees themselves, and query a broader base of neighbors. As we already have discussed, black bears have a really wide-ranging territory. So query sites like Nextdoor, Ring, and Facebook, as bears have pretty large territories and range widely. Okay, so I know there's a bear around my hives, but my hives have never been attacked. Do I really need to bear proof? And the answer is yes. Both woodenware hives and queens are surprisingly fragile around 300-pound creatures. Bears can easily go under, through, or over most fences, and many parts of their body have enough fur and fat to protect them from bee stings, as well as certain kinds of electric fences. Just because a bear hasn't found your hives yet doesn't mean that they won't. And once they know the hives are there and are easy targets, they will come back. And then you said they're big scaredy cats, so I can just run them off, right? And while it's true that black bears generally frighten easily, it's hard to keep a 24/7 watch on your hives. Bears are as likely to come in the middle of the night while you're asleep as they are in the middle of the day, perhaps even more likely. My hives were attacked, but how do I know it was a bear? This question gets asked a lot, and if the damage was more than a few scratches, it was probably a bear, especially if the hive itself was toppled. We all know how heavy those hives can get, especially when they're loaded up with honey. And you can also look for claw and bite marks on the hives and frames. Look around too, as a bear may have drug frames away from the hives to escape attacking bees. Okay, so a bear attacked my hives. The bees survived, so I should be fine, right? Sorry, but that's just not the case. Once a bear knows that there's easy prey around, they will definitely come back for more. And this is as true for bees as it is for things like bird feeders and garbage cans. So this is my apiary back in 2021, I believe. And this is like a honestly kind of a best case scenario for what can happen in a bear attack. Nothing was truly that damaged. We did lose our hives because there weren't enough bees to survive, but we didn't lose anything other than the bees. So yeah, so that was from December 2021, and then again in January 2023, my hives were attacked overnight when our solar-powered energizer was dead from lack of sun/weed shorting it. Both hives lost too much population and or lost their queen and failed to make it through the winter. And on the right here, we have a picture of some of the bear damage on the frame here. So you can see like the very visible claw marks on the frame there. Some other example of bear damage in 2020, Green River College and Bees in the Burbs lost one of their honeybee research sites to a bear attack that had damaged or destroyed around $20,000 worth of equipment and bees. So that was a pretty severe, like worst case scenario bear damage. But also, like I keep an eye on posts and forums, and there have been numerous local posts and accounts from just this year on Facebook and other forums noting bear attacks on their apiaries. This is the culprit here from our 2021 attack. So how do you bear proof your apiary? And this is a picture of how our apiary looked about a year ago. So what you need, this is an inclusive but not exhaustive checklist of what you may need to bear proof your apiary. So you're going to need fence posts and enough fence to run a recommended 4 lines around your hives, including ample space to work and move around your hives. And keep in mind that you are going to be suited up when you're working your hives, so leave enough space for you to move while suited up. I don't know about you, but I always feel very bulky when I'm in a suit. If you want something sturdier than line, then electrify cattle panel instead. You need some way of entering your apiary, be it a gate or some other method. You need a way to protect that method of entry, whether it's spooled wire or just an on and off switch. You need a charger or energizer that's pictured over here. This is not a particular energizer that I recommend, just as this is just an example of one. But you need a charger or energizer that's rated 1 for the length of the fence you're running, 2 for the amount of weed pressure you expect to have, and 3 that has an output of at least 7,000 volts. I have seen recommendations of 5,000, but 7,000 is really like the minimum that you need. Keep in mind you need a way to turn off the fence for when you're working the hives. Also keep in mind that solar, as I can personally attest to, is not a good option around Western Washington, especially in the winter when your hives need the most protection. This may mean you need to trench out to your apiary to hardwire or use an AC plug to plug in your fence, or you may need a battery wall nearby. You're also going to need grounding rods. You're probably going to need at least 3, but do default to whatever the Energizer manufacturer's recommendation or what the math says that you need. You'll need things like standoffs, wiring, tools, etc. And I get asked a lot about cameras. They're recommended for spotting, but they're not particularly useful for deterrence unless they have a siren function. And generally, the siren function is owner activated. So it would be something that you would have to be aware of in order to use it. So you've got like a game camera here, ring cameras. This is a grounding rod here. This is a standoff. And this is an example of a gate that you can use. So my personal recommendations is first thoroughly examine your space and make notes about what's expected throughout the year. Are there a lot of weeds, grass, shrubs that might grow into your fence and short it? How many feet of space do you need around your hives to work them comfortably while suited up? Are there any other predators that might be an issue? And also something that people often forget is how much signage do you need to protect yourself liability-wise, as well as friends, family, and neighbors. Make a checklist before purchasing to make sure that you don't forget something important. Ask me how I know about that. Running at least 4 lines spaced appropriately with the bottom line within 6 inches of the ground will minimize the bear's ability to crawl, slink, or dig under the fence. The top wire needs to be at least 4 feet high, but preferably closer to 6 feet high to prevent climbing or jumping of the fence. Or just use really tall cattle panel, which is stronger than chicken wire. Solar is tempting, but hard because hard wiring and trenching can be a pain, but it's really not worth the wintertime risk. Plus, they can short and drain easily. I do recommend getting a fence indicator, which is what's pictured here on the left, so that you can see from a distance whether your fence is running or not. That can definitely save some people some pain knowing that their fence is up and running. And you can double up with deterrents like motion activated sirens or sprinklers. Just make sure they don't disrupt the bees, and also, especially with sirens, make sure they don't disrupt your neighbors. So this is my setup here. This is currently what my setup looks like. You notice the solar panel there. The solar panel used to be connected to the Energizer, but it's now connected to the weather station instead. So as you can see, the charger is currently plugged in with an AC plug, but we're actually going to trench out. We're in the process of trenching out to hardwire it this summer. It was built before our hives were placed, so we basically measured out how big of a space we wanted for our hives, how big of a bench we wanted, and then made space around that. It has 5 sides that are cattle panel fence, plus a front gate with 2 coiled wire latches to close the loop on the circuit. The fences are about 6.5 feet high. The bottom is about 5 inches off the ground. It has a swing gate for easy access and easy movement of tools, hives, nukes, supers, etc. It has caution signs on every single side of the fence to alert neighbors, family, and friends. It's got about 2 feet of space on either side of the hive bench to work the hives. We use an AC plug-in energizer. Ours is way overkill, but it is effective. It's 115 volt input, which is standard for American wiring. It's 60 cycle, which also just means essentially that it's compatible with American wiring. It is a pulsed output, so what that means is it doesn't run continuously. It pulses every second. It is a 4-joule output at 75 ohms, which equals about 17,000 volts of output. So definitely enough to get a bear away from our hives. It has a 75-mile range. It's low with low impedance, which basically means not a lot of weeds touching it. It's got 9-ish miles with heavy weed impedance. And as you can see, we definitely don't have 9 miles of space. So definitely a little overkill for our area. And as I said, it will be hardwired with an on-off switch installed by the end of summer. There are 3 grounding rods, which are buried and not visible. The roof isn't strictly necessary, but it is very nice to have in Western Washington weather. We have definitely done a couple nuke installs where we've had to do it that day and it was raining or terrible weather. And we were able to do it because of the roof. I also have Apame hives, which I get asked about a lot, and they are expensive, but they are worth it in my opinion and my experience. In the first attack, the bear couldn't even get the hives open. In the second attack, the bear barely got 1 hive open, but couldn't get anything out of it. He just managed to scratch up a couple frames. No other major damage was sustained, so we only had to buy new bees, not a whole new set of equipment too. We also do have ring cameras. One is pointed to the hive and has a siren, but we've only had the opportunity or timing to use it once. And there's also a game camera, which is also not pictured, but it's pointed at the hives to snap shots of intruders and prowlers. And I get a lot of people who ask, well, how do you know your setup works? And on the right is some visitors that we had, some very adorable visitors that we had about a month ago. And on the left is the damage that our visitors left us with. That is our trash bin, which is in supposedly a bear-proof bin. Obviously, they were able to get into it. But ever since we plugged in the fence, we've had multiple bear visits from multiple bears over the last few years, and not a single one has gotten into our fence. So we've had multiple bears test it and have found it effective. Just some best practices. Keep your apiary clean and tidy. Don't leave open frames or boxes out. It also can encourage robbing, obviously. Store all your beekeeping equipment securely and as near as your apiary as possible. Obviously, for offsite, that's not possible, but do what you can. And then harvest honey as soon as possible if you are in a bear area, or at least after the flows end to minimize the temptation and scent. Get a game camera to watch your apiary and check the SD card and batteries regularly. This can help track when bears are around and if there are patterns to their behavior. So do they mostly hang out around winter? How many are there? And you can usually tell a lot of bears do have pretty distinct markings like this mama bear does. So you can usually tell both by size and markings if there are different bears in your area. Like I know, for example, right now we have 3 bears in our area. We have a male, we have a female, and her cub. And then take down bird feeders and any other attractants you may have in your apiary. And while bears may enjoy a good bird bath, it's not necessarily considered an attractant because it doesn't have a smell. Store garbage and yard waste bins in the garage or in a bear-proof structure, or use bear-proof bins or bear lid locks. Some common myths are I can just watch my hives or I've got cameras. And the fact is it's pretty much impossible to watch your hives 24/7, even with cameras. This one I hear a lot is that I need to bait my fence to make sure it works. And first of all, I have to really hammer home that baiting your fences, baiting a bear is technically illegal, so I can't actually recommend that you do that. Second, it's also not guaranteed to work. The best thing to do is just build a fence that a bear can't mess with. Especially if you build the fence properly, the bear is going to get a shock on like their nose or body if they come into contact with it. The bear will just barrel through or dig under the fence. This is technically possible, but this is why smart wire placement or the use of cattle panel is highly encouraged as what, and while it will prevent that from happening, it's also far less likely to happen with a black bear than it is with something a lot bigger like a grizzly. I ratchet strap my hives to the stand so they can't be toppled by a bear. Unfortunately, ratchet straps just mean your entire hive structure and stand are going to get toppled instead of just the boxes. It also absolutely does not prevent a bear from smashing wooden hives and boxes. I'll just put my hives higher off the ground and they'll be fine. The fact is bears are great climbers, and I'm sure they'd appreciate the challenge to knock your hives off a platform. Bear-proof platforms do exist, but they're more commonly used in grizzly country. There's a lot more to them than just putting them up high. Then they're generally used alongside electric fences as well. So it's usually kind of a multiple layer of protection issue. And then I have motion activated sprinklers, sirens, lights, so I don't need a fence, right? Unfortunately, those deterrents are not at all foolproof. And in the case of a hungry or even a curious bear, probably won't do anything. You can keep those methods, but double up with a solid electric fence to truly protect your apiary. Especially the motion activated lights tend to not really do anything with bears. So some takeaways and final notes. The big one is do your research. Is your apiary in an area that's in bear territory? What works for your space? Do you need to trench out to your fence line? And what supplies do you need for your specific space? Make a list and check it twice. Ensure that there's room to move, work, and set things up and down while suited up between your hives and your fence. Keep your apiary clean and free of attractants. If you can, obviously a lot of us can't, but if you can, build your bear-proof setup before you get bees. And then the last one is stay vigilant. If you can deter your bear buddy before he or she gets to your fence, all the better. And that is it. We'll stop my share and turn it back over to Eli. Oh, hi, Rachel.
Okay. Yep. It looks like Rachel already has a question.
Yeah, we have bears in the house in the mountains in California, and they've broken into my house numerous times. And the Pine Mountain Club recommended these mats, which basically the bear steps on it and it gives him a shock. It doesn't kill him; it gives him a shock, and it greatly discourages it. I didn't have the money for those. They were like $800 for a mat. So being rather prudent and having remembered Vietnam stories from Vietnam, I actually used punji and it worked fine.
Use what?
Punji stakes.
Oh, okay. Stakes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's liability though.
It is. It is high. It is. There's a huge amount of liability with using those.
Well,
And
that
even
it
with the
also-
electric fence, there's liability possibilities, but
Well, the
signage
punji-
obviously heavily decreases that.
The punji also works with humans, which was the other problem I had. So
Electric fences will also generally work with humans, although obviously they can turn them off or disable them.
Yeah.
But that's another reason like cameras are a good idea, especially if you are in a high theft area. But yeah, the mats are a thing. I've heard mixed results about whether or not they're worth it, because they are incredible. They're way more expensive than building. Like even our structure was way less expensive than using those mats. They also take up a lot of space. So not everybody has space for them, even though obviously taking an electric fence uses up some level of space. The mats tend to be very large because you don't want the bear to be able to like jump it. Obviously, if they work for people, then that's awesome. But out here, I would just recommend building an electric fence. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be easier. It's going to be stronger in the long term, especially using high tensile wire. So yeah, that's what I recommend out here. And that's generally I've done a lot of research too, and that's generally the recommendation that I've come across. I have a question. What if the child will touch the energized fence? Yikes. So that's one of those things where I would just say education is probably your best thing, or putting up some kind of barrier. So having like a secondary fence around it that the child can't get around, or putting up maybe some kind of foam or something. But yeah, just educating the child that the fence is not to be touched. You can hear electric fences when they're on. They're not passive. I mean, they are passive, but they're not quiet. So teaching them to hear when the electric fence is on, teaching them that it's dangerous. I think education is going to be your best tool if you have children around. And that's a possibility. There's a question of, could you meet the recommended voltage for an electric fence? 7,000 volts is the minimum recommended voltage. Obviously, you can get energizers like mine that have a lot more, but that's the minimum recommended voltage for deterrence of a bear. With regard to your comment about the ratchet straps until toppling the hive, my husband poured a concrete pad under our hive stands and we stuck eye bolts into the washers with the concrete to anchor the hives. So that could potentially be effective. But I've also seen bears literally smash boxes like in stacks, which was pretty brutal, and collapse stacks that way. So there's like a super in the stack and they just smashed it.
Yeah, and
So
we've had something similar because we learned the hard way a few years back as well. So it's not, you know, bear proof, but that is one of the steps that he took that has been pretty awesome. And I can tell you that it holds up to the lawnmower when he hits the hive stand with the lawnmower and everything shifts. The hive stayed.
That's good. That's good. I mean, it'll definitely, like, it's one of those things of like, it falls into the same category to me as like cameras and like sirens and motion activated sprinklers of like, it's a good precaution, but it's not going to strictly save your hives if a bear is really dedicated.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we're similar to you. We've got the 5-strand wire, and then
Awesome.
because some, you know, we're not always great about the weeds, so he put a little cutout switch for that bottom row if we need to, so we don't drain the solar charger. But yeah, we've got the hives up on 4x4s in pure block, and then anchored in the concrete pad, and then he's got driveway alarms and a solar light to give us a few extra seconds to react in case one does come around again.
Nice. So it sounds like you're armed to the teeth for it.
As much as we can be.
Yeah.
That was an expensive year. We didn't have the
Yeah.
May. We suffered the rebuild.
Oof. Ouch. I'm sorry to hear that. We got, if your low wire is 6 inches off the ground, you will need to have a weed barrier or frequently run a weed eater fairly often. Yes and no. If we have a high impedance energizer, so even it's designed to be used out in like prairie land. So if you
I grew up on a dairy farm and I dealt with all of that, but you still compromise it because you have dew on the grass in the morning, and that will compromise it because they won't chop through it. They don't make the fence, even though they're quote high powered these days. They're nothing like they used to be 20 years ago, which would deck a cow. So just beware of that because they will short out on you.
Yes, it can, like I was gonna say, you can still definitely short them out, but definitely if weeds are an issue in your area, choose one that has a higher impedance. And then obviously do manage the weeds in the area. Like we go out and pull our weeds and weed whack on a semi-regular basis. All right, if nobody has any other questions, I'd be happy to turn it back over to Eli. If you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and just direct them towards me, or if you have anything else, feel free to reach out and I will answer them.
And that is great to have a resident bear proofing expert, because it's one of those things that comes up and I just go, all I know is our electric fences never worked well when I was a kid. And I got my physical education as a child chasing the hogs because they were good at escaping. Our fences were clearly not high quality. And they knew every trick there was. Like they'd root up dirt and throw it on the bottom wire. And then the wet. One branch falls over, and and my parents were probably being very careful with kids not to have a really high powered fence around too. So that's really wonderful. And there was so much information in that presentation. Anybody signing on, remember it's recorded. So it's going to be easy to go back and read it later and look at the diagrams again later. That's going to be really an important like library item for the club. Actually, Brandy, you might think about talking to some other clubs too. I bet they'd invite you if they realize anybody from other clubs here. I don't know if Brandy really wants to, but you already have the presentation. And it's big, important knowledge. So anyway, thank you so much. So if there's no more questions.
No problem.
Okay, then I will do a quick fair, and I promise it'll be really quick, but the fair is upon us before I realized it was upon us. I'm really surprised. It just somehow time went by. So, Okay, and Brandy can keep answering some questions too in the chat. Okay, great. I can't really watch all of it very well. So let me start my presentation. Let me share screen really fast. Sorry, it will just take me a second to get started. Beginning. Okay. You already know you're in the SnoKing business meeting. And so we're just doing bears, fair, and Varroa treatments. And for those who are staying for the Varroa treatments, I realize that all I need to talk about is not the full 10 that are out there on the market, but the 6 that people really use that are actually recommended. And that we will demo. I think I have a type of all of them. You can bring some extras if anyone happens to have extras, but I think I kept Hop Guard from last year, have at least one of the Formics. And I got the new Varroxan, so we will go through the ones you can actually get that are available. And I'll mention one that's coming up that's going to be available. So first, the fair update, because it was just suddenly, the fair is going to be here actually in 5 weeks. And I'm sorry, I have to keep admitting people because I did a setting wrong on this meeting. The first thing is we're ready to sign people up. We're going to have the usual 3 shifts a day, 3 or 4 hours at a time. If you do 3 shifts total for the fair, you qualify for a t-shirt. And let's see, probably can't see what I'm wearing, but I'm wearing the t-shirts that you'll see in the pictures. I think they will be black this year with this design and a great design on the back. There's so much fair information. I'm going to send out a separate email and not keep you here. Some people can't do the fair at all, but I would point out that it's one of our greatest community building events, and we're really lucky to be in the Monroe area and have something that's a family friendly, a little bit of something for everybody fair. It really is. It has some, not just animals, like somebody said, oh, I don't want to go stinky stables again. No, there's cute animals, there's displays, there's of course vendors, and it's that wonderful fair food, right? That costs so much money and is so calorie laden. And yes, but also I put a list down here. I couldn't resist. I mean, isn't there something you really want to see at the fair? The cat costumes, the huge draft horses. I want to hear the hog calling contest, those cute pygmy goats, that lumberjack show, and there's all kinds of dancers and singers. So thinking about that, and that you might want to enter your honey or your pollen or your wax, I'll send out the email and explain how to do that. Tim 80 has come and talked to us in the past. If you go to last year's, I think, June meeting, if you go to YouTube, SnoKing Beekeepers, YouTube, go to SnoKing Beekeepers. We have our own channel. Go to the monthly meetings playlist and look back for last summer. And I think even the summer before. There's really good advice on how to enter your honey, and it's really easy. The only thing is you have to get it in by the Saturday before the fair by 5 p.m. or have a friend drop it off for you. But the fair itself is so much fun. We get together. It really is our big social event of the year. And we put out all kinds of equipment and things that we can talk about. Here's this is Jo Dietzel. She's actually holding that bumblebee. We really like that bumblebee. It's kind of a mascot at this point. We've taken it to so many fairs. She's holding a stuffy bumblebee. And then we put out the hives, and there's a pollen trap on the front of that one. We put out things for the beginning beekeeper, and we put out things that interest a more experienced beekeeper who would like to know how to trap pollen. We have wings. Those are not absolutely perfectly correct wings, but they are the general design of wings for bees. The 2 wings that hook together, sort of hinge together, and they're great fun. We made some kid size and we made some adult size. And you can do all kinds of things. If you just want to come hang out at the fair, hand out pamphlets, say we're a club, we have meetings, you just want to do that kind of interaction, that's fine. We need you. If you need to go inside and work at the honey booth because it's a little bit cooler, that's okay. We need you. If you want to do the smoker demo, if you want, like Joe Dietzel was doing, stand there in front of the hive parts and say, yeah, this is how we keep bees. And we let the bees, and then you show people. A lot of people have watched YouTube, but nobody has actually stood there and said, we buy imprinted foundation and stuff like that. You could just do question and answers. If anyone would like to perform the waggle dance, that's my personal favorite. I think we should do that. I haven't gotten any volunteers yet, but you can explain all about beekeeper suits and tools. If you want to show how the bees do an inverted figure 8, they do this really interesting figure 8. I'll send you the video and I'll even demonstrate it. I have done that. I probably will do it again this year because it's so much fun. People are laughing their heads off and explaining all about bees. And if you would rather talk native pollinators, we have a lot of posters. I think I've got one up behind me. There's one there. If I slide my picture and my bio picture, I've got one back there. It's really neat to talk about all the bees that people are seeing all the time, not just honeybees. We have something for anyone. You can pick any part of it that you want to talk about. Here's the smoker demo. Okay, it's smoke, it's fire. People actually want to see us light a smoker. It's really actually kind of fun. So there's Mike doing it. Here's question and answer. Walt, who passed away this past year, he came for 3 years and he loved to do just wear a bee vest and talk to people. And people liked that. They'd sit down for a little while, rest their legs. This is a little tent that's next to our tent. And we can use that whole space area. Yeah, there's Joe again. And it's just some of the people in the t-shirts. We were showing off the t-shirts and how happy we are. It is just fun. There's Jen wearing the funny bug eye glasses. I need to get more of those. Those are fun. The t-shirts, they will be black. They won't be exactly like this. Becky's at fire camp and she makes the t-shirts. She has a Cricut machine and she puts the design on. Okay. She said that probably for the back, it'll be somewhat like this cartoon up above. And it'll say, don't worry, I'm a pro. 3 shifts. You work 3 shifts, promise to work 3 shifts at the fair, and we will make you a t-shirt. Tickets. The fair is also a very good financial deal to volunteer for because prices keep going up. It should be a family-friendly thing. And if you come and work 3 shifts, you've got 3 admission passes, one of which you had to use to work. Then you've got a parking pass, 3 parking passes, so you can come back. You can help your family come back too, because you only need 1 to come in for that day if you work an entire day. And the parking has gone up to $15 every day of the fair. So if you just take an admission, and your admission passes are good anytime, weekend, full price, they're good for up to the $18. I hadn't realized that on the weekends, it's $18. Your pass is a general admission. And then the $15 for the parking, unless you can get dropped off, I will send that out in the email that I need to send out, another email with all the information about the fair, because I know some of you won't make it, but it is our greatest community opportunity, and it's like our social event. So come hang out, even if you think, I'm not really a fair person. Come on. This is your chance to talk bees with other beekeepers. Okay, then any questions on that? I promised I wouldn't talk too long because I know it's advertising. Anything in the chat that I should know? Okay, people are still fascinated with the fence because that was really, really good information on the bear fence. Thank you so much, Brandy. Okay, now we get down to the bees part. Okay, this is hard because we have to talk about Varroa. And after 10 years of beekeeping, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but I dread the V word, Varroa. And the problem is we keep hammering home, you've got to do something about it. You can't stall. And I'm happy to talk chemical-free methods, of dealing with Varroa, but they require intensive effort, dedication, and a little bit of advanced beekeeping, actually, because it's really hard to understand both bees and Varroa. And like this graph is the one you probably see everywhere. Honeybee Health Coalition put this out, I think, years ago. The blue line is the bees, and we are trying to get the bees to grow from January to December. We want them to overwinter. It says dormant there on the left. We want them to increase in population. We want them to peak. And our prayer is that they will peak at the blackberry flow, right? And at the blackberry flow, we will have lots, actually peak just a little bit before. So we have lots of foragers to go out and get the blackberry flow. And some of us are hoping that this population will still stay up and will, right about where that red arrow is, maybe a little farther to the other side of it, we'll have the knotweed flow in a lot of Western Washington. Okay, the problem is bees are the host for the Varroa mites. And that means that when the population of the bees peaks, that beautiful peak on the blue curve, the prey, the parasite that's feasting on our bees, sucking the insides out. It's so gross how they do that. Those mites, their population is going to peak right afterwards. And you're going to have a massive amount of bees coming up really soon. It's going to make the change. So that's why my little red arrow, you are here. You are right before the Varroa population is at its peak, but the bee population is starting to come down. And you may not have thought about your bee population is starting to come down, but some places the bees backfilled with the blackberry nectar and started to backfill the brood nest. And no matter how much space you put in there, our bees love to hoard nectar. And if the nectar was there, they filled up everything. And you keep putting in more frames and they keep spreading the nectar around because they have to spread it for it to start dehydrating. And they're working with it. They're putting enzymes, they're blowing bubbles sort of in it. And will eventually take 2 or 3 frames of that nectar those frames were only partially filled. They will eventually ripen it down into honey, into 1 frame. Some of it they will use because they were at peak population. Hopefully, everything went well and you had peak population during our peak flow. But the population will start dropping because they did become so obsessed, a lot of the colonies, with that nectar flow that they backed off on brood rearing. Now there's going to be a little bit of a dearth coming up. And I don't want to talk about dearth and robbing now. I'd love to talk about it with an extra meeting. If we do the fair, somebody tell me if you'd like to hear me talk about how the dearth kind of leads to the robbing and the yellow jackets show up about then. And people start saying, where's my queen? I don't see any eggs or larvae. Do I really have a queen in there? And that's an important question. And I know we'll talk about it in the apprentice class that's ongoing now. But we also, by the time we have our next monthly meeting, we're almost at the fair. Be a good time to still talk about it then. But we are hitting this point where the Varroa mite population is peaking, which means there's more mites per 100 bees to feed on our adult bees because the brood nest has gotten smaller and the bee population total is going to go down some. This is why Varroa is not the big problem until now. And we need to start taking care. Oh, this cute animated slide, isn't it? I always forget it's animated. So if you've taken classes with us, you've listened to me talk Varroa, if you go to YouTube to SnoKing Beekeepers channel, again, the July talk last year, I think I talked longer about Varroa, and I don't want to talk a long time about how it infects and how it injects viruses into our bees after digesting their insides and slurping them out of the poor bees. Anyway, okay, it's gross. Sounds like a horror movie. But we still have this problem of Varroa. We're getting close to 40 years ago. The Varroa came in and we never solved it. And our bees still don't have the natural resistance we wish they had. There's some work on that. We don't have Varroa proof bee stocks, but we do have some that are somewhat resistant. We still don't have some way to zap the mites so well once a year with one dose that it's taken care of. We have to stay on top of it. We have to monitor for Varroa, and we have to have methods. And I'm happy to talk about treatment-free and all that in the question answers, if people want to talk about that. But I'm going to just go straight and focus on what we can do with chemicals. Part of it is that graph I was showing you, and I started to write out an explanation. And the explanation is that what I'm trying to say is that if we want those fat winter bees, everybody's talking about the winter fat bees that we need. Well, I was trying to write it out. So this is a mixed up slide. But what I'm trying to say is the bottom line. If you have healthy summer, late summer brood in July, August, that's not being fed on too much, being fed on by Varroa. You've got the Varroa population down. You're going to get the wealthy winter bee brood in September, maybe later, emerging then, and those will be the healthy fat bees that will make it through the winter and help raise out healthy spring brood. And it all starts with well-fed bees that are not being eaten up inside by Varroa. And you will see all kinds of horrible things like this. Varroa symptoms cover a whole spectrum. And that's kind of bad because it confuses with a lot of other diseases. But sometimes it just looks awful. These are examples of the kind of collapse that happens in your colony with what they used to call PMS. What does that stand for? PMS. It's a syndrome. It means Varroa. I think they've renamed it since then. But the mites have parasitized your adult bees so much they can't take care of the brood, they can't take care of the queen, and everything is collapsing inside your hive. I hope you never see it. So to monitor, we use alcohol washes or sugar rolls. And I have an easier way to do that. This Saturday and the next Saturday, 12 noon to 3, I'll go through all the types of monitoring I can, the half dozen types of Varroa treatments that people really use and that we really recommend that the mites are not resistant to. And I'll show you, I think, an easier way than the shaking all the bees out and having them all fly in the air to collect samples of bees to do the alcohol wash or the sugar roll on. And I like to use Easy Check. It's just easier, but there is a homemade way that works too. Okay, there's a lot of different ways. That's the non-chemical. I'm happy to go over those. A lot of people like the idea of drone trapping. It's not enough to really stop bees. There are a lot of systems. I put the slides in here because I like to talk about them, but I also don't want to hold people up because it's already, well, it's not that late. It's 7:18, but by 8, I want to make sure everyone has heard what we really wanted to say and has a chance to ask questions about it. But there are a lot of, and I'm happy to talk about them, but unless you're going to live intensive treatment-free beekeeping, it isn't going to work for most people. And I can explain why. So we are left, we have to do something chemical in addition to doing a certain limited number of things we can do. Reduce entrances, feed bees when they need it, clean up any dead bees around our hives that something's happened and it might infect the hives, the bees that are coming back to the hive. It might attract yellow jackets. There's some basic management things we do. We don't just do chemicals. We don't have a biological control yet, but we are hopeful. So your treatment types are really what they call the organic acids and the essential oils. And I don't recommend the ones that are called synthetic engineered. And I was wondering, I thought I maybe had, yeah, right here, I have my slide. Bkprs has now joined the largely Varroa are resistant to it. It's not working reliably nowadays. The beekeeping supply stores, I think, are still selling it. Checkmite long since stopped working. Apistan, sometimes called Zocon. They are all the synthetic engineered large molecules. The bees are basically resistant to them. In the case of Bkprs, it really is overuse by commercial beekeepers. If the mites are constantly exposed to it, there's a selection that the mites that survive are the ones that they just shrug off Bkprs. Toxicity. These are also toxic to bees, and when you have to use more and more of them, they're going to be harder on the bees. And there's also the problem of persistence. And especially checkmite is known for persistence. It just doesn't break down in the hive. And eventually, even if you took the honey supers off when you use it, you go and you put the honey supers back on, it was still in the hive in the wax. And it's one of the worst for persistence in your hive, even though you followed all the instructions. So these are the actual ones that I want to talk about. Let's see, did I get, it's really, technically it's 7. Formic acid is in 2 forms. It comes in Formic Pro, Mite Away Quick Strips. I think it's the difference between whether you order from Man Lake or Dayton and certain other places. I think Canada may use more Mite Away Quick Strips too. And then we have Hop Guard, which is a very messy one, but very organic. All of these are actually organic, especially compared to synthetic, large molecule engineered pesticides. So you're looking at the organic spectrum here. So the two formic acid, Formic Pro, Mite Away Quick Strips, Hop Guard, which is an acid technically, but it's not a super acid. Then I have, oh, here's Varroxan in the center. It doesn't, oh yeah, you can see the sign, the little icon. That's Varroxan, the new kid on the block. Oxalic acid that is on fiber strips. So now you don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to make your own anymore. The Swedish sponge method people talked about. This one is supposed to slowly release over a long period of time, which is the biggest concern with do-it-yourself type slow release oxalic acid. Then the real oxalic acid, the official commercial pesticide applicator, official one is Bioxyl. It is essentially the same as what is sold in the store as oxalic acid, the hardware stores. But it is the one that's officially legally to be used, especially by pesticide applicators who have to be licensed and agree to follow all the laws, regulations. And then we have the essential oils over here. The essential oils, Apiguard, which is the gel. I've got that here. I can demonstrate that on the next 2 Saturdays when we do this. And the Apalife Var. That is a tablet that you break up. Okay. So I thought I'd start with the essential oils because there's only really 2 of them. Now, people do this on their own. Again, do it yourself, but you don't know how much to do for how long. These come with instructions. They're both fairly volatile, but not like formic acid. So right there, a lot of people go, okay, essential oil, doesn't stink as badly as I wouldn't, if I was installing very many gel trays or very many of these tablets, you would still want to wear respiratory protection. You might skip for your hives. It does say on the instructions that you should be covering your respiratory tract. You should be protecting it a little bit with at least an N95 or so. But they're not as bad as, say, formic acid or oxalic acid. And then they're both Thymol. And Apalife Var has a few extras in there, a few extra essential oils. It has menthol, camphor, I think eucalyptus oil. Possibly might be better. It's a little bit of a different essential oil. If you're going to use the gel trays, they're a little bit thick and the bees have to crawl into and on the gel tray. So they have to be put on top of brood frames. If your boxes only have bee space, there's not room for the bees to freely crawl on those little, oops, sorry there, the little wafers, or crawl into the trays. And the bees are actually going, yuck, this stuff stinks. And they're trying to get rid of it. They're trying to get it out of the hive. You need them to crawl on it freely. So this kind of little shim here, it was originally called an Emery shim. George Emery published the plans for it. It's also, when you are buying it from some bee supply catalog, it also is called a honey shim. And the thought is that an extra upper entrance placed on or in the middle of the stacks of honey supers allows the bees an extra place, an extra entrance to come in without tracking their way all the way through the brood nest up to the top. It has a couple of uses, but that is actually why it's called a honey shim. Well, in the case of pollen patties and ApiGuard and the Life Var, which is not Apivar, it's totally essential oil. It's also very useful for that. Actually, I'm thinking this is almost basic beekeeping equipment for a lot of people because it lets you do a number of things that a good beekeeper ends up doing. Now, the acids. A lot of people don't like the word acid. HopGuard is technically an acid, but it's very weak. It's very slimy. The strip that's hanging over the frame there, that looks pretty dry. They aren't. They are sticky, slimy, and they are to be put on the hive that way. But not very volatile. You definitely want to use disposable gloves. You would never want to get that on your gloves or on your suit. You have to wash your suit. Not so much toxic as a mess. It is definitely organic though, and allowed on organic farms. The same for all of the things that I'm talking about. To the best of my knowledge, would be allowed on organic farms. Now, oxalic acid is the golden child, I call it, because everybody wants to talk about oxalic acid. But formic acid is still very popular, and I've been getting questions about it, like on the phone and by email. The temperature, because our temperatures do sometimes jump. Well, the good news is if you read the instructions really well, you will notice that it says the first 3 days or so is when it would make the most difference. If your temperatures go over the 85 recommended for both of these, both the Formic Pro and Mighty Way Quick Strips say 50 to 85 degrees, and it is in the first few days. Some people don't like the fact that their bees try to escape. The workers try to escape by going out and bearding and hanging out on the front of the hive. They often will do that when you put these treatments in your hive. They stink. But you shouldn't actually allow the bee, you shouldn't actually try to do extra ventilation. You want to hold that horrible vapor. It's fumigating your hive. That's why I put the word fumigation there. That is the purpose of formic acid. I highly recommend you half dose both Formic and Mighty Way Quick Strips. HopGuard, it's actually, you can use it like 4 times a year. It's a very safe that way. It doesn't have that whole acid connotation. Now, oxalic acid, if you're handling it, is not the problem until you get it wet or until you fumigate it. You vaporize it, which is really, I know it's really sublimation, but everybody says vaporizing. So we're going to use beekeeper lingo here and call it vaporizing. When you get to formic acid and to oxalic acid, vaporization, there's no way to get around it. You've got to protect your respiratory tract, which was actually recommended for a lot of for like the essential oils. If you were to help somebody in a large apiary and be constantly handling thymol, it would be bad for your respiratory tract in the long run. Before I go any further, is there anything in chat I should see? You have to interrupt me. Somebody flag me down if there's a question or something there, okay? Because I can't watch both. I've never learned to do it. I love the quick release mask, half mask. If you use a half mask, remember your eyes. You've got to be watching. I wear glasses. There's nothing that should splash. One reason for wearing these masks, and especially the part that goes over your eyes, is so you don't forget when you take off your gloves, you don't forget and rub your eyes or rub your face. That's actually one of the biggest reasons to be wearing this. Also, it's protecting your respiratory tract. Once you breathe in acid, the acid stays there. Your body has a hard time taking concentrated acids and neutralizing them without damage to you. Do keep up on replacing the cartridges. And honestly, everybody should have masks like this around their household because we work with ammonias and bleaches and we paint. We have so many things we do with chemicals in our lives that it's a good investment. You may find you use it for other things too. If using it for formic, oxalic acid, and even really the Thymol, you should have the cartridges, which are interchangeable. You can change them out for organic vapor, acid gas. And I already mentioned the ApiGuard gel. That's me doing the demonstrating the crazy sort of an inverted flip on the figure 8 pattern that bees use. Okay, did that wake everybody up to see that funny picture there? Okay, good. So on the formic acid, there's the two forms, and they are pretty much the same. They look a lot the same. I haven't used Mighty Way quick strips for a while. One thing about formic acid is it was never intended to use for small hives. If you have only a few frames of brood, that's really too much. The reason is the way formic acid works, the bees are supposed to move the gas, the vapor through the hive and keep moving it around. If they don't do that, if the weather's too cold and it sits, for example, it's actually not good for them. And if there aren't enough bees to move it around, it's not doing its job. It's just sitting, and they could end up with sitting in a cloud of the vapor that's too concentrated for them. If you use Mighty Way quick strips or Formic Pro, if you're using formic acid, I highly recommend you do the half dose method. In large commercial apiaries, they don't have the time. We're small scalers. We have the time to go in, put in a half dose, and then it shows 2 here per brood box for 10 frame deep. Actually, it's about an 8. Is that an 8 frame? 1, 2, 3. Might be an 8 frame that they're showing it in. And then to put in 1, come back 7 days later and put in the other strip and make sure you take them out at the correct time. We can do that half dose method. We don't have to just put them in there and come back 3 weeks later to take them out. Because these are volatile acids that kill mites. Yes, that's good. They kill more mites than bees if there are mites there. But they also can kill eggs, larvae, and queens. The queens sometimes just get replaced. They're not strong enough to lead the hive through this stress. And it is a stress. But formic acid is highly popular, especially with commercial beekeepers. So small scale beekeepers try to use it too. We're getting late in the year to use it. First, we have the temperature problem. The temperature can go over in that first 3 or 4 days, which is the critical time for the temperature to go over the 85 that's recommended for daytime temperatures. But also we have the problem of you need to come back and check about a month later, be absolutely sure. I would check even a week or 2 later, make sure you've got a queen. But a month afterwards, the queen can slowly have been superseded if she managed to lay an egg. One of the problems of formic acid is sometimes all the eggs and all the larvae were killed. The queen did not get a chance to lay any more eggs after the treatment, maybe because she wasn't there or because she was so stressed and impacted by the formic acid. If that happens, if you have a hive where the queen dies and there are no eggs and no larvae, You need to notice that so that you can bring in the chance for the worker bees to make a queen, which would be to give them some larvae, some eggs that are just eclosing into larvae from another hive. But if you treated all your hives at once, you're a small scale beekeeper, you got 2, 3, 4 hives. If you treated them all at once, if you use full dose and you kill off all the eggs and larvae, you may not have that chance to give the eggs and larvae to a queenless hive. I don't know if the Mighty Way quick strips have that little cellophane, they call it the eco wicking wrapper in that each pad has. If they do, I know formic acid does. If Mighty Way quick strips has it too, you don't take that inner wrapper off because it controls how fast the pad gases out the formic acid. If the temperature rises on you in those first 3 or 4 days, you're going to have to ventilate a little. You'll lose some of the effectiveness, but you don't want to lose your queen. In Mighty Way quick strips is falling out of favor because it has a shorter shelf life. You have to watch the expiration dates. It's only like a year, and then the expiration date kicks in. And there are nice diagrams out on formic acid explaining how you are supposed to place, where you should place the pads. Here's showing you I guess give you the queen excluder, even the between 2 brood boxes, especially like if there's 2 westerns and you're treating them the way you would treat a deep brood box, you're going to put the pads between. This is a nice diagram. Look at those diagrams, but sometimes they don't tell you something like, don't try to do this with a smaller hive like a nuke. That's one caution that I noticed that they have added to the formic acid and Mighty Way quick strips. And here's some diagrams saying, okay, you're going to do it this way. You have a permanently, this bottom one says options for permanently reduced entrances. You may have to do a little crack, offset 2 boxes, crack the lid to make sure that there's enough airflow that the bees can handle it and move this vapor throughout the hive. Formic Pro, there's the picture of the little cellophane outer cover that people don't understand they're not supposed to take off. You have one, like a mylar that holds like 2 pads together. You open it up and then you don't take off the inner one, just the outer one. Please use the half dose method, please. And pretty much it's the same as Mighty Way quick strips, except you have a longer shelf life. If you buy this, it can have a shelf life of up to 2 years. So, and you can ask when you order this, if you're ordering it mail order, you can ask for a certain expiration date. I know I'm not going to finish using this until next spring. I need to make sure the expiration date does not come before next May or June or something. And then they're pretty good about honoring that. Hop Guard, I mentioned, it is the slimiest, messiest stuff. Do not buy a full 10 doses of this before you've tried it. It is the messiest, sloppiest stuff you've ever seen. But you can treat it back to back. You put in 1 set of strips, and then 2 weeks later, you can put another one in. You can do it up to 4 times per year. And it is one of the treatments that is safe enough to do on bees that are in packages. When they're shipped, people can actually staple half strips into a 2 or 3 pound package of bees. So should you ever receive one that way, they're treating for mites in transit. Then on newly installed bee packages, this one is slimy and icky, but it's not as off-putting as I think formic acid could be. And I noticed that it says, go ahead and put 1 strip on your newly installed bee package right in the brood nest area, right in the center of your box, 7 to 9 days post installation, which I have always thought was a good plan. Let the bees settle in, feed them. Don't treat a nuke right away. I'm almost through, if you've noticed, the half dozen treatments I was going to talk about. The 2 essential oils And then we have actually 4 acids. I haven't done oxalic acid yet because that's the big topic. That's the one that everybody has the most questions about because it involves, well, for most people, getting some kind of vaporization equipment, which I can show all different types of because I have quite a number, from the wand to the cheaper Varroa vaporizers, oxalic acid vaporizers for Varroa. And then I finally got the Laura B's expensive one. There's a new one coming up. This Noroa, it isn't available yet. And it will be extended release. One of the problems with our treatments is you've got to get back in there every week or 2. And then you have to monitor before and monitor afterwards. And for a lot of people, that is so much work that they hesitate to do it. So I probably am preaching to the choir to the last of you who stayed to talk about the V word, but it does have to be talked about. And this one is looking promising. It has to do, I would say, with RNA interference, interfering RNA that everyone's been talking about for, what's the other thing we're doing right now? In bees, there's another interfering RNA is being used. I've been reading so many papers recently. This is apparently what this is going to do. It's going to interfere with a certain protein synthesis step in mites that should not interfere with anything in bees, but it's not yet approved, which is why if you go to order it, all the companies say out of stock. What they're actually saying is not yet available. It hasn't quite been approved by the EPA. Okay, oxalic acid. I have the upper left one. I have the bottom one down here. I have another one called a BD Reaper. I have at least one of the wands. I'd be happy to talk about all these to anybody that comes, even if it's at a time different than these 2 Saturdays. This is the less expensive version of the $500 Laura Bees, which I hope will come down in price now that there are more types of vaporizers available. Happy to show you how they work, how you load them and know how much oxalic acid to put in. It's the gold oxalic acid. You're going to get tired of hearing about it if you are not comfortable with it. But with the new Varoxan that's available, slide coming up, extended release strips to replace that Swedish sponge idea. If you are not comfortable with the vaporizer, that method, we're going to go ahead and give it a try. We have the strips. We're going to start putting them in. And I would like to do that the next 2 Saturdays. Oxalic acid, after you invest in the hardware, the wands aren't that expensive. The wands, I think you still get them with tax and everything for like $50 or so. Oh, I did want to show one thing. Before you buy any of these, this one is cheapy. You know, I understand that. But this one here has a thing called a glow plug. And it's kind of important that you know that this glow plug means that it takes longer to heat. And this style, the pan that holds where you put the oxalic acid powder in, is a lot thicker. It takes a lot longer to heat. It won't heat with a really small, I used to use my little solar powered battery on the automatic gate opener, remote control gate opener. And that battery is not strong enough. You have to have more like a car battery to do it. This one you could still do maybe with, it will only do a couple of hives with the little tiny batteries. The car batteries are better. Some people just drive their lawnmower up or their truck up. I think this one with the glow plugs might have longer leads. It varies quite a bit. And if you can get those alligator clips, maybe you can get this to work reliably enough for you, but it takes longer. It pulls more power to heat. I want to mention that on these others too. Talk about them to somebody like me that has several of them and can go through kind of the pros and cons. Some of them, you get them and you realize you can't put them over a long, like this one here, the landing board can only be so long. and jut out before you're running into the battery. You have to actually see it to understand why some of these aren't a good fit for the profile of hive that you might have. On the other hand, if you drill holes that come from the back, it can be a lot easier. So there are a number of ways to administer oxalic acid, though, and some people are more comfortable with others. The Varroxan, here it is, the strip method. You don't lay it on top. This is a picture of do not lay it on top along the bottom. Drape these over, not tightly, but you use a lot of them. So when you buy $100 packet of 60 strips, you'd think, oh, I can do all kinds of hives multiple times or whatever. No, because you're supposed to put one almost every other frame. So like in a 10 frame, you're supposed to put 4 of these across. And that if you do a second box, my understanding is you still do another set of 4, but it's not considered very toxic. Oxalic acid is about as gentle a miticide as you can find. The only toxicity, I think, is when you are pouring the liquid acid on the bees. I don't like that method. The drench dribble method, I'm afraid of pouring it on a queen, quite honestly. So this one, I think a lot of people are going to be happy with this. People who are already using the do-it-yourself and feel okay about that, okay. I like to know that something is supposed to work for a certain amount of time. And the thing about the Varroxan is it's a contact. It's supposed the bees are going to be walking over this. It's not messy. And it is supposed to be slow releasing for 42 to 56 days. And that is figured to be about 3 complete reproductive cycles for Varroa. You can use this in nukes, any size hive, any odd hive. In a lot of ways, for a horizontal hive, you can't use formic. I highly do not recommend you use formic acid in a horizontal length long. If you do, think it through, decide how you're going to do it, how the bees are supposed to ventilate when they can't, and where you're going to put those formic pads. I've heard some creative things that people have done, but it's not going to be simple the way it is. The other methods are definitely designed for stacking Langstroths. And the idea that there will be ventilation up and down as well as sideways. I could see these working a lot better in a Langstroth long hive because they drape right over the frames. Long shelf life, they're talking 24 months. And there was a caution about, oh, these won't work with high infestations. Well, for the do-it-yourself, and apparently that's true, but this one is supposed to be, okay, we're trusting the supplier, right? They're selling us something, but they say it will work with high infestation. It will start knocking the mites down and fast enough. That would worry me too. I'd rather use this as soon as I got, and actually the instructions recommend a threshold of only 1 or 2% instead of saying 3%, then you worry. When you're doing your mite test, that kind of percentage. So I'm going to skip that. I did write out an oxalic acid vaporization protocol for using a wand, and that's available if anyone wants it. If you are not comfortable with vaporizing, there is the drenching. 5 milliliters of the solution dribbled down each of the seams. You're trying to directly hit the bees going down. Some people love this. It is an acid. You better definitely be wearing protection for your skin. And remember, when you take the protection off, you're washing your hands, not rubbing your eyes with acid or anything like that. Here's a very fancy, there was a small scaler who actually made the nozzles. I thought it was a really neat picture and figured out how to get that 5 milliliters down each of the seams by correctly spacing these nozzles and turning the little pump on and off. It's a lot of work. I have never seen that. I thought it was a neat picture. Oxalic acid is like Hop Guard. You can treat nukes upon arrival. The thymals, I don't know if they're recommended. I would think they would be a little more difficult to treat a nuke upon arrival, but the HopGuard and oxalic acid liquid, and I would think even if you wanted to, the vaporization, but I still would wait, as it said for the HopGuard, I would wait 7 to 9 days post installation. I'd give them time to settle in, make sure the queen is happy, she's not stressed, she's laying, the bees have settled in and are staying, they're not going to abscond because I didn't stress them in some way that was unnecessary. So this is, you can spray through the screen, the glycerin oxalic acid mixture, according to the instructions on the package, or spray the sides of each frame as you are installing your nuke. And I was just putting this notice in that we are going to have this next 2 Saturdays, noon to 3 p.m. We'll be going through as much as we can of this, and we're going to make it a 3-hour session because it actually usually takes longer. And I think we're going to need to sit down in the shade in the middle. We probably will go into a hive at some point, maybe a couple of hives, even if we demo some of this on the empty equipment. We also need to take some look at some bees, right? Couldn't go to an apiary without doing that. If you have the bee jacket and veil, bring it. Email or text me. I'd love to know if you're coming, but probably bring a drink or a snack. I have ice water if that helps. I'm sure I can do that. And then we'll use disposable gloves, not your own gloves when you come to an apiary. And that's pretty much what I really wanted to get through. Thank you for sitting through it. If you already, I suspect a lot of people on here already know all this, but you're explaining it to someone else, and maybe you're looking forward to that Varroa, and who knows, that Varroa thing sounds like I put a pouch on the top of the frames and it works for 18 weeks. Would be nice. Another long release in addition to Varroa that is, I assume that would be accepted by organic regulations too. Okay, I probably should stop the recording now because that's what we really need. Let me do that.